We begin this morning with the war in Ukraine, where Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin are now the highest-ranking U.S. officials to visit the country since the start of Russia's invasion in late February.
Sunday's visit was shrouded in secrecy and only confirmed by the White House after the U.S. delegation had left the country and arrived in Poland. In a meeting with President Zelenskyy, America's top diplomats pledged additional military aid and the return of American envoys to the country. That meeting comes as Ukraine's Orthodox Christians marked a somber Easter yesterday as Russian forces continued to pummel the eastern part of the country. Speaking after that meeting with Ukrainian officials, Secretary Blinken said Russia's military campaign was not succeeding.
The strategy that we've put in place, massive support for Ukraine, massive pressure against Russia, solidarity with more than 30 countries engaged in these efforts, is having real results. And we're seeing that when it comes to Russia's war aims, Russia is failing, Ukraine is succeeding. Russia has sought as its principal aim to totally subjugate Ukraine, to take away its sovereignty, to take away its independence. That has failed.
We've got NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli live from Washington alongside our foreign correspondent Kelly Kobiella in Odessa, Ukraine. Good morning to you both. Mike, let's start with you. How did this surprise visit come about, and what's in this latest military aid package the U.S. is pledging?
Well, Zinkley, over the last month, of course, we've seen a number of high-level European officials travel into Kyiv, including the British Prime Minister, the European Union Commission President. So there had been discussions within the Biden administration about whether and how to send in a high-level U.S. delegation, whether to perhaps be Secretary Blinken, Secretary Austin. In the end, the Biden administration decided to send both. And you're going to hear a number of superlatives surrounding how this visit came to be today. It really is unprecedented, the kind of security logistics that were involved. Both of these men arriving separately in eastern Poland overnight on Saturday and then traveling 12 hours in and out of Kyiv by train before they returned to Poland, where they then began to lay out some of the deliverables, because that had been one of the questions, whether this was purely a symbolic visit or whether they would come with specific things to further deepen the commitment between the U.S. and Ukraine. One of those is a $713 million financing to help modernize Ukraine, but also some of our Eastern European allies' weapons systems from some of these Soviet-era systems to more modern equipment. Here's Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin describing some of what these leaders discussed overnight.
In terms of their ability to win, the first step in winning is believing that you can win. And so they believe that we can win. We believe that they can win if they have the right equipment, the right support. And we're going to do everything we can, continue to do everything we can to ensure that that gets there.
Now, you see there Secretary Austin actually standing in front of some of that equipment that is on its way into Ukraine. Now, as we talk about this visit, let's also underscore the fact that that President Zelenskyy sort of preempted this by announcing publicly that they were on their way to Ukraine before this even happened. That did raise some concerns about the security on the U.S. side, but a senior U.S. official downplaying that overnight, saying simply that this is his country and it's his right to discuss what he wanted to.
And hey, Kelly, it's Savannah. I want to bring you in here. So let's talk about Ukraine's reaction to that support that Mike just outlined there. I mean, Ukraine's President Zelenskyy actually said on Saturday that any world visitors coming to Ukraine not come empty-handed. So how is this meeting received and this support? Are they satisfied with it?
Well, when you listen to what the president of Ukraine said after that meeting, it certainly sounds like it. He said that the U.S. was offering unprecedented assistance. He thanked President Biden, the Congress, both Secretaries of State and Defense for their visit, and as well as the American people for what has been just an incredible amount of military aid flowing into this country since the war began. More than $3 billion in military aid, closing in on $3.5 billion in military aid over the past several weeks. He said that this new package of military assistance will bring the defense capabilities in Ukraine to a new level. He didn't get specific on exactly what that means, but he did say it was extremely important for the defense of this country. At the same time, the Ukrainian president, as always, is saying this country can always use more and is still pressing for tougher sanctions against Russia. That's something that he's been talking about, as we know, Savannah, for weeks now. Savannah?
And so clearly a high-stakes meeting. Mike, aside from additional military assistance, the U.S. also nominated a new ambassador to Ukraine and signaled its readiness to send envoys back to the country. Tell us more about that. And could we see the U.S. follow other countries by opening its Kyiv embassy anytime soon?
Yeah, this is going to be a slow process, but let's start with the new ambassador, Bridget Brink. She's currently the U.S. ambassador to Slovakia. Now, this is significant because Ukraine has not had a Senate-confirmed U.S. ambassador in place there since 2019. That's when President Trump fired Maria Yovanovitch. That's a familiar name from his impeachment trial. So this is going to be an important symbol of the U.S. returning a full-time ambassador with the president's support on the ground to be better coordinating on a daily basis with the government there. Now, the U.S. also indicating that they are prepared to now begin slowly returning U.S. diplomatic personnel into the country. Remember, they had originally left Kyiv, moved to Lviv, then into Poland. They're now going to begin daily visits in and out of Lviv, and then eventually the goal is to get them back to Kyiv.
And Kelly, quickly before I let you go, I do want to ask you more about what's happening on the ground there. Many in Ukraine celebrated Orthodox Easter over the weekend amid, of course, this just continued shelling and bombardment. What's the latest where you are? I know also in Odessa, which did suffer an attack, even though it had been relatively safe until now.
Yeah, and just to explain what's happening behind me, Savannah, this is actually cleanup from that missile strike over the weekend, which hit this apartment building in Odessa. You can see where it made impact and also just the extreme damage done. About 8 people killed, among them a 3-month-old little girl, her mother and her grandmother in this strike. And the first strike on a civilian location in this city since the war began. So this has created an awful lot of anger toward the Russians after this strike in particular. As for across the rest of the country, the British intelligence assessment this morning said that the Russians had made some minor gains in the east, but no significant progress in their war there. And Ukrainians said today that just in the past couple of hours, there have been some strikes on 5 different rail systems in the central and western part of the country. They said there are casualties, but haven't given details yet on those casualties. And Savannah, just from a personal perspective, here in Odessa, someplace that has been relatively safe over the past few weeks, we've just heard almost hourly air raid alerts since we arrived on Saturday morning.
All right, Kelly, thank you for describing that on the ground to us there. We're thinking, of course, about that family and that infant. Mike and Kelly, thank you both for your time and your reporting this morning. Let's now bring in Clint Watts. He's a distinguished research fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute and an NBC News national security analyst. Clint, always great to have you with us. So let's start with some questions I have here about railway stations. So the New York Times is reporting actually that 5 railway stations in central and western Ukraine came under fire this morning. Now, we know the railways have been critical to not only evacuating Ukrainians, bringing in humanitarian aid, also, though, for getting military hardware to where it's needed most to get from the western part of the country all the way over to that eastern part of the country. And then, of course, oftentimes this is where civilians are gathered as they are trying to get out. What kind of role could these attacks have on the battlefield?
Yeah, so I think the key part there is when you look out towards the west, we've seen less military activity, except for missile strikes. And I think the key spots to look at are Lviv and here in Venetia. If you look at that corridor from Kyiv, Venetia to Lviv, they're trying to push all of this military hardware out to Dnipro. Dnipro is kind of the center of activity on the eastern part of Ukraine, also very proximate to this Donbas region here. So keeping those railways going is really how those heavy supplies are going to move in. It's not really feasible or possible to bring those in by air. So keeping all of these corridors going, it's important for military hardware coming in and humanitarian corridors heading out.
And Clint, what is the latest in the east in that Donbas region? Yeah,
so from the east, this is where we are seeing what the UK military said were some gains. Specifically, what you're seeing is repositioning of Mariupol, some of the forces, the Russian forces there, being pushed towards Donetsk. Separately, this axis here from Belgorod down into Ukraine, particularly to Izium, is the military axis where most of the supplies are coming in. These are the forces that were up here in northern Ukraine and Kyiv being pushed back around out here to the east. If you zoom in, what you're seeing is these small advances. Here around Severodonetsk, the Russians are trying to push and envelop those Ukrainian forces there. They're also pushing and probing here. This is that axis for Izium. Essentially, these three fronts, these are small. What they would like to do is here in Donetsk is try and push here to the north as well and encircle Ukrainian forces. They have not had a lot of success yet, but it's still a matter of time. Essentially, the buildup of the Russian military is still occurring.
And Clint, I want to go down south and first mention what we were just discussing with Kelly, which is this attack over the weekend, missile strikes launched by Russia into the port city of Odessa, which, of course, is where Kelly just mentioned some of those civilian casualties there. That city had ultimately been pretty spared until this point. And now a top Russian commander warned that Russia's goal is to capture a land corridor that would stretch all the way into the country of Moldova. Now, does that mean there's a possibility that this could spill over into another country? And with Moldova not being a NATO country, not being part of the European Union, what would that mean?
Yeah, so I think the question is, are they just being bold in terms of their strategy and their words, or are they actually serious about it? Right now, all the Russian combat power is tied up here in the east. But from the beginning, what the Russians tried to do here in the south was to move into Kherson, which they did very quickly and took, to Mykolaiv, which they moved to, and then were stopped essentially right here by the Ukrainian military. What they had hoped to do, I think, initially was move all the way here towards Moldova. This is an area known as Transnistria, and essentially surround Odessa. I think it's probably a bridge way too far for them. They've got way too much combat power tied up here, and they've taken way too many casualties.
Clint Watts, as always, thank you so much. Appreciate your time this morning.
Staying in Ukraine, President Biden's plan to welcome up to 100,000 Ukrainian refugees to the U.S. is taking a big step forward today. This morning, a new website went online to help expedite the U.S. immigration process for Ukrainians fleeing the Russian invasion by allowing Americans to sponsor them. It's all part of the White House's Uniting for Ukraine program. For more on this story, we want to bring in NBC News justice correspondent Julia Ainsley. Good morning, Julia. First off, how does this program even work and why now?
Well, this program is set up for Americans, whether they personally know Ukrainians abroad or not, to be able to sponsor Ukrainians to come to the United States. They need to show that they could financially sponsor that person and that there's someone who is not going to use this for ill intent. Again, they would have to be vetted to make sure they're not trafficking in Ukraine for labor purposes. The first people in line to try to use this will be family members, people who have family members who have fled Ukraine and they're trying to bring them to the United States. And in fact, I spoke to some of those people over the weekend who said they would be first in line. I spoke to Drew and his wife, Svetlana. She has family who have fled, gone to Poland. She has a very elderly grandmother still in Ukraine. She also has some family in Russia. They're trying to figure out how to get them out. This is what they had to say. Let's take a listen.
It's kind of like the visa Hunger Games. You know, it's going to be, there's 100,000 spots. There's not really any information that's come out. All they've said is that they're going to shut down the Mexican immigration route.
Yeah.
But we don't have any details of what information they need or what the eligibility exactly is going to be, besides the fact that there needs to be a U.S. sponsor.
So you can see a lot of unanswered questions so far about how this is going to work. I'm personally trying to find the website this morning. I'm in touch with these people to see if they've been able to get on, what they're being asked. There's a little bit of confusion, but you heard him talk about how they do know that the southern border is going to be shut down. So now these people are saying, okay, if we have family in the region, we don't have to take them through that risky route. Let's try this website and see how it works. So there's a lot of hope for these people this morning.
Hope and also high stakes, hearing him say immigration Hunger Games. That's intense. And for context, we know that last month the administration said it would bring up to 100,000 Ukrainians fleeing war to the United States. But with no clear end in sight for the war, what does the White House expect in terms of that number? Could it grow? Is that realistic?
Well, yeah, you heard him call it the Hunger Games because they think that 100,000 is a drop in the bucket. But in reality, they might not even get to 100,000. The way they've been so slow so far to meet their overall global refugee number doesn't give these people a lot of hope. In September, the end of September, President Biden set a global refugee number of 125,000 so far, and they only have until the beginning of October of this year to meet that goal. They've brought in just over 8,000. So they're not anywhere close to meeting their global refugee goal. This program should expedite the route for Ukrainians, but a lot of people are worried that it might require too much paperwork. It, of course, requires COVID vaccinations and proof of that. And, of course, the sponsors themselves have to be vetted. So first, they want to make sure they even meet that 100,000 goal, and then we'll see if it could grow.
Definitely a story to watch. Julia Ansley, thank you so much.
Let's head now to France, where Emmanuel Macron has been re-elected as president. Macron managed to fend off a challenge by far-right rival Marine Le Pen by taking more than 58% of the vote in yesterday's runoff. In his victory speech, Macron vowed to unite France following a highly charged election campaign. The Washington Post Paris correspondent Rick Nowak joins us from the French capital now with more on this. Rick, thank you so much for joining us on this morning. So in the end, I mean, this is a fairly comfortable win for Macron. I just mentioned taking 58% of the vote. So tell us, we know he's the first sitting president in 20 years to be reelected. How significant is that? And what are some of his key challenges and priorities in this upcoming term?
Good morning. I think his victory really is very significant, especially when you look at the margin with which he won by over 17%. Really, that was unexpected. The polls had been a lot narrower over the last few weeks or so. But he does face quite a lot of challenges going forward. He does need to unite a very polarized, a very divided country, and a country where over 40% of the people, of the voters, tried to elect a president who is far right. So he really does need to do a lot of convincing over the next years, and he does need to try to reach out both to the far right, but also to some of the left wing and some of the leftist voters he has disgruntled over the past years.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about Macron's rival. You just mentioned sort of this far-right candidate, Marine Le Pen. Now, despite losing again, this was a far stronger showing than 5 years ago. So what does that mean has happened over the last 5 years in this country? What's next for her? And is it safe to say at this point that her party is, firmly cemented in the mainstream?
I think that's exactly right. She has succeeded at moving a fringe party from really the corner of the political spectrum into the mainstream. This is now a significant political force, and it's unlikely to just go away. So that really is a major shift. And she has succeeded at doing so by moderating her own image. If you look at her platform, if you look at her policies, they're quite radical. They're as radical in many ways as they were 5 years ago. What has changed, however, is the public perception in France. Those ideas have become more mainstream, and she has succeeded at portraying herself as softened and different.
Rick, thank you so much. We appreciate your analysis this morning.
Thank you.
Now to a major push for COVID funding from the Oval Office. The Biden administration is preparing to reintroduce the $10 billion COVID spending package that stalled in Congress. The White House initially requested $22.5 billion, but later slashed that number to fund the war in Ukraine. Half of the funding would go to therapeutics. The rest would be split between vaccination efforts and affordable testing. The funding package comes as COVID cases rise across the country and also after a judge's decision to stop mask mandates on public transportation. Now, as more people return from spring break, officials are worried cases will only go up in the coming weeks. Dr. Amesh Adalja joins us now for more. He is a senior scholar at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. Doctor, good morning. 2 years into the pandemic, why is it important that we get this COVID funding now, and what is at stake here for public health?
You have to realize that COVID-19 is not going to be eradicated. It's not going to be eliminated. So we're still going to have a need for vaccines, for boosters, for antivirals, and for testing well into the future. And right now, because many of these countermeasures are available only under emergency use authorization, there's no commercial market for them. So if the government is the only buyer and they don't have funds to buy things like Paxlovid, then there won't be any access to them. So you have to keep that in mind, that these aren't normal commercial products at this point. And we can't be in this boom and bust, panic neglect cycle with funding. We have to be proactive. Until they hand all of these things off to the commercial market, the government has to be funded to be able to support the pandemic response.
And I hear you saying we have to be proactive. And the reality is, while Congress battles over this funding, cases across the country are going up right now. So we know people spent the last week traveling for spring break and Easter, Ramadan, Passover holidays. So if people get infected with COVID, when would they start seeing symptoms? And could we start seeing a spike from this?
Symptoms usually start 2 to 3 days after exposure. The incubation times have kind of shrunk with Delta and now with Omicron. So we will likely see increasing cases. The key thing is to make sure those cases don't translate into severe disease. And the best way to make that happen is to make sure people are vaccinated, that high-risk people are boosted, and that people, when they get sick and get symptoms, can rapidly be linked to drugs like Paxlovid, which keep them out of the hospital. Our goal is to de-link cases from hospitals so that hospitals never get overwhelmed. I think we can do that, but we need to use all the tools that are out there to be able to be optimal at how we manage this.
And a new report from the CDC shows that COVID was the third leading cause of death in the United States for the second year in a row, behind heart disease and cancer. What did you take away from these numbers, and what can be done to bring that number down?
The most important thing to me is the fact that deaths went up in 2021 versus 2020, and we have a vaccine in 2021. So many of those deaths that occurred, the third leading cause of death, is something that's vaccine preventable. And I think we still have this problem where people who are dying of COVID are not vaccinated. Only about 66% of the U.S. population is fully vaccinated, and that's what's driving deaths. But when it's vaccine preventable, when people are turning away from a technology like the vaccines, which are life-saving, that really is mind-boggling to me.
Important analysis. Dr. Ramesh Adelja, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, China's zero COVID policy is getting more extreme in Shanghai. Authorities are in the process of building giant fences to lock people into their homes. Now, some residents are fighting back. NBC News foreign correspondent Janice McEfreya reports for us.
Harsh new tactics in Shanghai to enforce the COVID lockdown. Metal fencing put up around some apartment buildings to keep residents from being able to get out. Security guards on duty 24/7. Authorities calling it hard quarantine, but people are fed up. Videos posted to social media showing some pulling the fences down. Much of the city locked down for over a month now and struggling with isolation and lost income. This man not wanting to be identified to avoid trouble with local officials.
It's going to take even longer if the most basic problems are not getting solved.
The world's largest container port still idle, with more than 500 ships waiting to dock. But with all the zero COVID rules keeping Shanghai at a standstill, COVID is still rampant. More than 21,000 cases added Saturday and 39 deaths. And now lockdown fears spreading in Beijing. Authorities here announcing mass testing, triggering panic buying at stores, with most items wiped from shelves and long lines of people anxious to stock up, wary of the chaos that shortages caused in Shanghai. That hardship was captured in audio recordings that went viral across social media this weekend. There ain't no water, no food, says one man. Censors quickly removed it. The government here insisting lockdown measures will only be lifted when COVID is eliminated. Until then, authorities are building fences and tightening control. Janice McEfreya, NBC News, Beijing.
Let's get a check now on your Morning News Now weather.
Which means Michelle Grossman joins us. Hey, Michelle, good morning. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Good morning to you both. And we are looking at some unsettled weather today, some spring showers, some spring storms through the middle of the country. And we're looking at excessive rainfall, the chance of some hail, even some winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour. So this is what it looks like at this hour. We're looking at some heavy rain. That's where you see the yellows, the oranges, also the reds. We do have a flood watch where you see those green blocks through parts of Missouri, also Texas. And that's really going to be the main concern as we go throughout today. A very low risk for tornadoes. As we widen out here, we can see the rain stretching all the way from the Ohio Valley into parts of Texas. And it's going to move very, very slowly as we head towards the later part of today. off to the mid-Atlantic by tomorrow. So your rainfall forecast, up to 2 inches of rain in some spots. This is very soggy soil. So that's why we're looking at the chance for some flooding as we go throughout this afternoon and evening hours. We do have a severe threat, although low today, with those winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour possibly. Isolated hail up to 1 inch in diameter and a tornado risk, although very, very low as we head throughout the afternoon and evening hours. And that stands true for tomorrow as well. So April showers today. There's that cold front stretching all the way from Buffalo to Houston, Texas. The heaviest rain in Texas and Louisiana, and it moves ever so slowly to the east as we go towards Tuesday. Scattered rain impacting the East Coast, the Mid-Atlantic, the Southeast as well, and isolated strong storms in the Mid-Atlantic. Now we're looking at the battle of seasons. We're looking at really warm weather in the east, 78 degrees today in Syracuse. That is 17 degrees above what is typical for this time of year. That's ahead of the warm front. Behind this cold front, we are looking at really cold weather. We're looking at cold Canadian air filtering down to the upper Midwest. So 43 degrees today in Glendive. That's 17 degrees below what is typical for this time of year, just above freezing in Fargo. We're 25 below what is typical for this time of year. Tomorrow, we're going to hold strong with those warm temperatures in Richmond, 85 degrees, 86 in Wilmington, 87 in Savannah. Back behind that, we're looking at temperatures in the 40s and 50s, and Dallas here in the 70s. But by Friday, we're going to be into the upper 80s. Back to you guys.
April clearly living up to April showers, Michelle.
Oh,
yes,
no,
yes.
really.
Mayflowers, though.
Yeah, let's keep our fingers crossed with that. Thanks, Michelle. See you in a bit.
Sure.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.